the bigger the season, the bigger the feast. In the middle of the church liturgical calendar, we find Easter, the Feast of the Resurrection, which has a large section of preparation, which we call Lent, and a large season of celebration, which we call the Easter season. So we celebrate Easter for 49 days, and then we end with Pentecost on the 50th day. And before it, we have these days where we're preparing for the death, the crucifixion, and leading into the resurrection. We see something similar with other smaller feasts. So Christmas, there's a season of Christmas, and there's preparation for Christmas. Epiphany, you have some season of Epiphany, as well as some preparation for Epiphany. And all of this is to show that our life and our year centers around these events that are so important, not only to our lives, but to all of human history, all of salvation history. Even the whole world calendar, AD and BC, is based around this most important person, Jesus Christ, the reign of Christ, which has completely turned the world on its head. Now, if you are not a Christian, you might think, well, then what does this have to do with me? Why would this time be important? So we can recognize, yes, there are certain aspects of the resurrection, the victory over death, the victory over sin, that would seem to say, well, Jesus is only important to the next life. But there are also transformations that happen because of conversion. Because of conversion. Because we have met the love of Christ, we live in such a way that Christ's love is radiated out in all that we do. And so you would see something like the end of slavery. You would see something like the elevation of human dignity. You would see something like ideas of justice and mercy, which become universally applicable because of the Christian life. Now, in our lives, we have, whether we're Christian or non-Christian, we have encountered hypocrites, or we have encountered witnesses. Hypocrites are people who claim to be Christian, but live as if for themselves rather than for God and for others. Witnesses are people who express their Christianity in the love and life that they live. Now, this brings us to the question, can a non-Christian live the same kind of life that a Christian could live? Could a non-Christian live with the same virtue, the same in the world importance as a non-Christian? And this becomes a very controversial question. Part of it is because we believe that part of human justice is our relationship with God. So part of human justice is worshiping God and praying to Him. But even if we were to set that aside, right? Even if we were to say, well, let's take out of the equation direct worship of God as part of human virtue. You then have the idea of people being made in the image and likeness of God. And so this has a radical change in the way that we interact with other people. So somebody else can say, well, humans are important, we should care for them, we should take care of them, even if they have no intrinsic value, even if they have no innate value, even if they aren't worthy of love. And then we can go in and start to chip away at the edges if we're a non-Christian, right? We can say, well, there are occasions where the suffering of this person make it so that the best thing that we can do is assist them in death. And so they'll talk about things like dignity in death, or assisted suicide, or euthanasia. Or at the other end of life, they'll talk about, well, this person is unwanted, this person will have a difficult death, and so the way that we want to treat them at the beginning is, in order to avoid pain, we want to bring about their death. And so we see this as very common and as a very natural extension of the idea that people are not made in the image of God, that people are not intrinsically valuable, that suffering can remove our value. Whereas in the Christian life, we say no amount of present or future suffering takes away from human value. And so here we see the break between the Christian living the Christian life and the non-Christian living the life that they believe is good. That there is this case of the margins. Now, why do the margins matter? Why do the margins matter? If the person's value can be diminished by pain and suffering, so that their life no longer matters, then their life never mattered. And your life and my life never mattered. Because if we just enter in some amount of pain, it goes away, right? That's not an intrinsic value. This is something that's very difficult, very challenging. This opens up an even more, and I'm kind of shifting a little bit, an even bigger question, which is the idea of torture. And so a Christian is able to respond to torture in a way that's different than a non-Christian. Because if pain takes away human value, then torture and prison and humiliation are a way of diminishing somebody's value, increasing their suffering while diminishing their worth. But in Christianity, we see it as an innate acknowledgement of someone's worth. You don't torture a tree. You don't torture an inanimate object. And someone could be very cruel to an animal, right, to cause that animal pain and suffering. But even that, we would distinguish from human torture, right? Because in this torture of people, there is this recognition of a humanity and even a recognition of a divinity. Because in torture, you try to make the person so often reject their humanity and reject being made in the image of God. And how can they reject? How can they deny a reality? And so to be able, unless that reality is true, right? How can you deny a reality unless that reality is true? And so this is why we see Christianity shine so brightly in the prisons, in the death camps, in the torture, right? Because we see that there is not just a sustaining of humanity, but also a reverence of a divinity. I heard a woman's testimony who was in one of these prison labor camps as a Christian. And she talks about how her guard was converted by her life. And so her guard snuck her out into the nearby river so that she could baptize him. And she said, I really just had this idea. I want to drown him as I'm holding him under the water to baptize him. But she did it. And what she saw was this radical transformation in this man's life, in which within a week he was arrested because he was refusing cruelty. He was refusing to be cruel to the prisoners that he had previously been cruel to, and he himself was put to death. We see in these edge cases, right, not that humans have no value, but rather that people have eternal value. And so it's here, in this being made in the image and likeness of God, that we see the role of a Christian witness, that we see how A.D. B.C. 2025 years ago truly marks the most important person in human history, and how our year truly marks the most important parts in his life.